Hey Leute, herzlich willkommen zurück zu diesem neuen Video und schön, dass ihr auch heute wieder mit dabei seid. Heute habe ich etwas ganz Besonderes und sehr, sehr Exklusives für euch und zwar ein Interview mit dem Meisterparfümeur Aurélien Guichard. Falls ihr den noch nicht kennt, hier sind ein paar seiner Releases, unter anderem Versace Eros, Gucci Guilty, verschiedene Narciso Rodriguez Düfte, verschiedene Düfte von Kenzo und natürlich die Marke, für die vor allen Dingen Nischenfreunde ihn kennen. Und zwar ist das die Marke Matière Première. Ihr wisst doch schon, dass ich einige Düfte von denen vorgestellt habe und deshalb dürft ihr euch heute freuen auf ein halbstündiges Interview mit Aurélien in Paris zu der Story seiner Marke, der Herkunft seiner Inhaltsstoffe, was ich persönlich sehr, sehr spannend finde und vor allen Dingen natürlich auch die ganzen Impulse, wie er dazu gekommen ist und wie er seine Parfums gestaltet. Deshalb viel Spaß mit dem heutigen Video, lasst jetzt schon mal einen Daumen nach oben da und ich wünsche euch ganz viel Spaß mit dem Interview. First of all, thanks for being here, thanks for taking your time. Maybe we start out with how did you get into the perfume business in the first place? So what's your approach to it?
Thank you, Kai. Nice to meet you. Nice to be with you. It's a funny thing, but I'm originally from Grasse in the south of France. Mm-hmm. I am seventh generation of perfumer in my family. I grew up with grandparents who were doing roses, jasmine, verbena, but I've never really thought I was going to become a perfumer. And it only as I grew up in my late 20s that I thought there was something more than just a work. And because I never really thought that being a perfumer was a work, as I was seeing people around me doing that for their living, it was more like a way of life. And I think I chose to become a perfumer because it was a way of collaborating with people from different backgrounds, from different countries. Mm-hmm. And it was a way for me when I was maybe 18, 19 to escape, to work with people from different culture, different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. So that's how everything started, and that's why I wanted to become a perfumer.
The fragrance that I always think of is, or maybe are two fragrances that are like really, they're really like the door sign of your brand, which is on one hand Falcon Leather, and on the other hand I think Radical Rose. Because with a rose fragrance, Guerlain, and they all do rose, but in a very, very, very strict and old-fashioned way.
Maybe we can smell it.
We can smell it. We should.
I'm glad you speak about it. Radical Rose. I mean, first you see the color. The color of our fragrances are given by the natural ingredients. Mm-hmm. So there's no colorant, and we're very proud of the color. Yes. Now, what's very unique with Radical Rose and with Matière Première is we own our own fields of flowers. Mm-hmm. So every single rose that you have in these bottles are roses that were produced and grown by myself, mm-hmm. by my farm.
Yes.
So it's really something special. The thing with what we try to do is this idea to be able to share the creative intention that I have when I create a perfume. It's about showing the beauty of an ingredient.
Yes.
So we're very factual. We always talk about one initial idea, one main ingredient, and the creative approach, so that people understand what they smell. We actually feel that, you know, the traditional pyramid that you have to describe perfume is actually not serving the purpose of the creation, mm-hmm. because it's usually something that is made just to describe ingredients, top, mid, and dry. Matière Première, it's a round-shaped construction, one central ingredient. Here it's Rose Centifolia Absolute, organic. The creative approach was just to put the highest quantity possible of Rose Centifolia in a bottle. Mm-hmm. So it sounds easy when we say it like that, but it's challenging because in the Rose Absolute, in the Rose Centifolia, you have some beautiful facets, floral, spicy, woody, but there's also some old-fashioned facets, mm-hmm. like honey, like, you know, a bit waxy-like. So the whole challenge was to stay very simple with this huge dosage of Rose Absolute by using some ingredients that were, I would say, coherent with the rose. Mm-hmm. A bit of saffron on the top. There's some bay from Jamaica that actually brings more colors to the rose. Mm-hmm. And when you do the average, when you pick up the rose, and I do it myself when I pick roses with other people, but when you do it, you get a sap on your hand. Mm-hmm. And this sap reminds me of the smell of cistus and patchouli, because mm-hmm. it's something very dark, ambery, mysterious.
Yes, kind of green, I believe. Yes.
And so we've put a lot of these cistus notes in the fragrance, mm-hmm. because it's really reproduced like the beautiful dark impression of a rose, mm-hmm. and that allows me in my formulation to create a genderless fragrance. All Matière Première fragrances are genderless, meaning that when an ingredient is a bit feminine, I will counterbalance the feminine side with a more masculine one, in this case, saffron, cistus, patchouli.
What I think of when I smell it is like a freshly cut rose. So if I have like a fresh bouquet of roses, it always has some kind of green quality to it, and that's the same that I smell here. So.
I agree, because when they make the extraction, all those things have a reason. When they make the extraction of rose, they make the extraction of the petals, but also there's a bit of greens with it. That's what you smell green.
Yes.
And you can smell it because we have this main ingredient rose in a high quantity where you can really feel and smell the absolute. Whether I have a lot of admiration for many fragrances that were created by other brands, but quite often there's a lot of complexity that creates something beautiful, like a ship.
Yes.
With a beautiful example. I love ship, but a ship wouldn't be matière première, because a ship is a result of 6 ingredients that create something else.
Yes.
Whereas in matière première, we're very factual and simple in the way.
Yes. Yeah, so you wouldn't find an amber fragrance.
Yes, we try to stay close to the facet of an ingredient. People may not necessarily know that, but when they smell a rose absolute, just the ingredient, there's many facets: floral, spicy, fruity, woody, leathery. I mean, it's super complex. Yes. So the role of matière première is just to amplify certain facets that we think are beautiful.
So you just decided, you had huge successes with your other perfumes. You just told me, you did Eros for Versace, a couple of Kenzo, was it?
Yeah, Kenzo. Yes. I did the Narciso Rodriguez fragrances, Gucci Guilty. I collaborated with many talented Issey Miyake. I worked for many years for Mr. Miyake. Yes. I worked with Ron Arad, with the Diana von Fürstenberg. And in fact, working and collaborating with people is incredible, because it's like a dream, if you work with people that you admire the work of. But it's also very inspiring, not only to create perfume with them, but also to meet people who had the courage to make their own brands. Because behind every couturier, there's a creator, but there's also someone who has one day decided that he was build his own fashion house. Yes. And that was inspiring for me. And I thought, it gives you courage to work with such people, because you feel maybe it's possible to do your own fragrance brand. And so in this way, this was very influential for me to work with those people. But when I work for couturiers or marketing teams or brands, I work at the service of those people. And this is wonderful, because what you do is you translate an idea that will describe the style of a fashion house or of a brand. But you, as a perfumer, and as every perfumer in the world, you work hand in hand and you work at the service of those brands. Now, for me, I wanted to do something different with Matière Première. That was more about being at the service of a raw material. I've always felt that since I started to become a perfumer, that there were so many simple, obvious beauty about creating perfume. And it's a bit like a painter. Okay, painting is incredible, but the colors are incredible, and it touches anyone. Yeah. The colors that he used, but even the simple colors that are so rich and so incredible are touching people. And I thought, okay, what if I create a brand that's about that? That's about the raw materials that I have when I look at my Orga Parfum. I have, like every perfumer will tell you, they have amazing ingredients, and it's true. Yes. And we do. And I'm sure when you go to an Orga Parfum yourself, you smell a beautiful patchouli, and whether it comes from a certain region, it will smell different than from another region. And even if it comes from the same region, according to who will treat it, who will extract it, it will smell different according to the process, the know-how. And I thought this was so inspiring. Why don't we build Matière Première, that brand that is about those simple ingredients?
Okay, and the second one, Falcon?
Falcon. Well, Falcon, I know you told me before we started that you like Falcon Leather.
I love it, yes. It's actually my really favorite fragrance of the brand. Crystal Saffron comes close.
So Falcon Leather was created with this idea. I told you there's always an idea behind the creation of creating a vegetal leather. So it sounds weird because people usually think leather is not vegetable, but
yes.
in this case, yes, it is. The main ingredient is birch tar oil. Birch, is a tree, and from that tree you make a dry distillation. This dry distillation is then extracted to make birch tar oil. It's leathery and it's vegetal. But the interesting thing with this ingredient is that it smells almost, I would say, very textured, very close to the idea that we have in mind when we smell leather. And the creative approach was to combine this birch tar with a couple of ingredients that would give like the two-side effect of leather. So I've combined the birch tar with some cistus labdanum again to make like that slick, kind of almost clean impression that you have on one side of the leather, and some benzoin oil, a lot of benzoin, to give this suede, soft impression of the other side of the leather.
Yes. So one comment that I always get with this one is that people think it smells super clean. They say like it's like some kind of soapy fragrance almost. So that's really interesting because it's so untypical of a leather. Usually you have castoreum in leather fragrances, so that's like really dirty and not clean, and this one is really...
So we don't use any, of course, animalic note. All our fragrances are vegan, but this idea that you said of clean on a leather is very interesting. When you go into a car that has leather car, when you wear like a black leather jacket, you have this impression of leathery but clean at the same time.
Yes.
And so this impression of very true to the material, I think it's at the heart of Falcon Leather and what we do.
You told me about the farms that you have. So you have like a flower farm in France, or what's the story?
Yes, well, so as I told you, I grew up in a family where a lot of people were working in perfumes. And my grandparents had their own farm in Grasse, but at the time I was a little kid and I grew up with them and between Paris and Grasse. And I grew up surrounded when I was there by people who were such experts in every single raw materials. And if you go to Grasse, it's amazing because people are so expert in the raw materials according to where they grow. And you have little villages around Grasse, and each village will grow a specific flower. So if you go to Tourette, for example, they grow the violet leaf. If you go to Tanneron, another village that is about 5 kilometers away from Grasse, they grow mimosa. In Grasse itself, they grow rose centifolia, jasmine. And in this city, it's a bit like in technology. I read something about Palo Alto, where you have all those companies who grow for digital. And they grow because they have people who have the local knowledge, so the knowledge of growing systems.
Yes.
In Grasse, you have a local knowledge of growing flowers. And so people are expert in their respective fields for certain things, whether it's mimosa, whether it's roses, whether it's jasmine. So I grew up in that environment. And when I was about 35 years old, at the time I had been working as a perfumer for 15 years. And I thought, okay, it's amazing to create perfume, but what if I build my own farm where we grow organic flowers? What if I become the only perfumer who grows some of its ingredients and use them in its perfume? And most of the fragrances, and I believe it's true, are made, like people say, with very qualitative ingredients. But it's difficult to fill them sometimes. And I thought, what if, when I smell an ingredient, an absolute, it lasts for days. It diffuses, it's powerful. So of course it has many drawbacks, but there's something already like a composition given by nature. So I thought, what if we do a brand that's about that? We try to preserve the beauty of that single ingredient. And because I don't use many ingredients, but I use one main one that is at the heart of the creation, I try really to respect it, to respect its qualities and to hide its drawbacks.
Okay, yeah.
So that was the idea. And I started in 2016, 2017. I became an official farmer. And it's only then that I thought, what if we create Matière Première? What if we create that brand that is about from the field to the bottle, because matière première means raw material.
Yes, so it's really about the one ingredient with each of your perfumes. So what was the first fragrance that you created, or what was the first idea that you had?
Well, I had, in fact, the difficult thing was to come up with something that was true in the concept. You know, when you start something, you can have a vague idea of what you want to create, but you need, as a creator, and as I'm a real perfumer, I wanted to have a specific formulation. So what would be this formulation? We tend to say that in perfumery, like in many creative fields, there's no rules. So there are rules, but there's always a way to try to find to avoid them. And quite often, those creative rules are made to be challenged. And I think most of the perfumers that I've worked with in my life that were amazingly creative and talented, when they created amazing fragrances, because they were probably doing without the rules. And so, you know, matière première, that was really this idea of putting a huge quantity of that one ingredient. Then I thought, okay, I need in my formulation to have two things that were very important, to reconcile two things, something very powerful, diffusive, that people would give you comments on, but at the same time, not old-fashioned. Not like French old-fashioned perfumery where it's almost baroque because there's many elements together and it's too complex to understand maybe. So using little ingredients, choosing very carefully the main ingredient, short formulation, high dosage, looking at also maceration processes was important. And all those were key elements to build matière première and the formulation.
Yeah, so one interesting question that I also got is, or maybe two, what are your biggest inspirations? So in terms of people, who inspired you the most along your journey? And also another question is, how has this whole project of Matière Première changed your view on fragrances in general?
So for the first question, who inspired me? A lot of perfumers that I've worked with, many, and not one in particular, have inspired me. I've worked with plenty of talented people with unique ideas. That was very inspirational. Some couturier I've worked for inspired me very much. Issey Miyake is someone who inspired me very much. Narciso Rodriguez also. I would say some people that I work with on the daily basis on the fields. The growers, the people who work hands in the earth, in nature, are very inspiring. And they are inspiring because just like I created Radical Rose, when you do the Everest yourself, you live and you experience the raw material differently. And because you spend days and days with full of roses in your hand, some ideas come along in your brain. And that's, I think, observation of nature and try to work it in a minimalistic, modern way. It's very inspirational for me. I love the work of Tadao Ando in Japan. So it's always this balance between overdose of a raw material in a very minimalistic way of writing and approach.
And how has this changed your view on fragrances?
In fact, I've always been a very optimistic person. So I must say that Matière Première for me is incredible because I realize a dream, which is to grow your own ingredient yourself, to make sure the extraction is perfectly done, to use this ingredient, to put it in a fragrance that I create myself, to put it in a bottle that will be then on the shelf and available for people. This is a dream come true, is to be able to be like, okay, I'm creating a perfume in a way from the field to the people and to share this beauty. It's true for Radical Rose. It's also true for French flower made with my own tuberose.
Maybe we can smell French flower once again because that's also one of the releases from last year.
Yes. It's also, I think last year was the only year and will be the only year where we launched 2 fragrances. It happened because first, it's made with our own tuberose flowers. So it's absolutely unique. The tuberoses are grown in Grasse in the south of France. You have to know that there's rarely any fragrances made with tuberose from Grasse because the cost is so expensive. Like 1 kilo of this tuberose absolute is about 250,000 euro.
Oh, that's
so of course you can't use a lot of it, but what we've done is in French flower we have used 2 extractions, one absolute and one enfleurage. Enfleurage is the ancient way of extracting flowers, where you display on a bed of wax some flowers. When the wax will capture the whole smell of the flowers, you take off the flowers, you put some more, up until the wax is saturated with smell.
Yeah, it's like this is like the traditional way in Arab countries to create like fragrances.
Okay.
So they just put it in oil and let it rest for like years, and then the oil captures the fragrance.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so that allows us to really reproduce, that was our idea, the smell of a tuberose field. In the south of France, you know, the tuberose that we plant, they bloom in August and September. Ancient people say that people who are not married yet cannot walk into a tuberose field at night because it will give them erotic thoughts. And we thought there was something a bit cheesy about it, but there's something sometimes true about those legends. And this enfleurage really allows you to capture the smell of this field. And the idea was just to preserve this kind of bright impression of the tuberose flowers by using a bit of ginger oil from Nigeria, some tea leaf oil from China, and in a very simple way to keep this kind of crunchy impression by using just a bit of green pear with it. That's it. And the result is like a bright, vibrant tuberose. Usually tuberose are worked in a very dark, sensual, heavy way. We did the opposite. We thought, what if we bring the tuberose to something light, bright, daylight, very white, and that's French flower.
Do you have some plans for this year, what you will release? I mean, a couple of people from my community asked me if there is going to be a tobacco fragrance. I don't know if you...
Well, it's funny. It's funny that they say that, because it's really something that I love the idea of tobacco. Now, you know, some people sometimes ask me, what is the next ingredient you will work? In fact, there's so many possibilities, it's difficult. But maybe, do you have time if we smell the crystal saffron? Because this is our latest release, and it's really a fragrance that also, I think, describes very well Matière Première. You can also see it's like totally transparent. It's called crystal. Quite often people say that the look of an oil describes what it smells like. It's this kind of super pure impression of saffron.
Yes.
The crystal saffron was released a few months ago and is actually meeting a fantastic success because there's something very unique. You know, I think just like we did for the rose and for the leather, is how do you take an ingredient that is already quite heavily worked by different brands into a different place. Yes. And the idea was, instead of working a saffron that is dark, ambery, sensual, we thought, why don't we do the opposite? Why don't we take this part of the saffron that is very bright, luminous, to something very crystalline, very fresh, very, I would say, vibrant.
Yeah, vibrant describes it. Because,
say.
I was, something that really caught me is that it's like not sweet. You know, you have this MFK Baccarat Rouge thing that always comes to mind when you read about a saffron fragrance. But this one it's like not sweet at all, and that's so interesting because it still feels round and complex.
This fragrance, in fact, was, when I created it, it was because I discovered a raw material. And it's by discovering this raw material that I said, okay, why don't we create a fragrance with that? And the raw material was a saffron oil from Greece, the north of Greece. There's a region called Kozani. And they make crocus flower, and from those crocus flowers, they take the little stigmates that they let dry, those red stigmates, and then they distillate them. And one day a producer came and made me smell this saffron, and he said, it's incredible. And from that I said, okay, it's bright, it's fresh, it's vibrant. What if I create something that's about that? And the creative approach was just to amplify this kind of brightness. So I've used, together with this saffron, that is at the heart of this composition. I've played with some habanolide, which is like a very bright, vibrant musk. I've used some ambrox to give like some kind of addiction, but I would say bright addiction. That is a bit like woody, it's this woody facet that you find in the saffron. And just to finish, some incense that will just like let the saffron be. I see similarities between saffron and incense. Our fragrances are genderless, but they need to take the raw material to some places that it's different from what has been done. So this idea of brightness was really at the heart of modernity.
Yeah, so any plans for this year?
Yeah, so plans for this year. We will release, we'll do certainly some Hermes that hasn't been done yet for Matière Première.
Yes.
We have now a line, I think, of 10 fragrances. We don't want to launch too many fragrances. That's really something we feel luxury house today. It's better if we don't launch too fast.
Fewer, yes,
so
absolutely.
There will probably be something by the end of the year, maybe. I always say maybe because it doesn't obey to marketing plans. It's like if we get something that's really good, we feel okay, we launch it. This fragrance crystal saffron was not planned until we said, okay, we get it, let's launch it. Yeah. So it was only finished maybe 2 months before being launched, or 3 months before being launched. So it will be the same plan. But there are so many ingredients that I love. Iris I love, vanilla I love, oud I love. I'm planting right now some lavender in the south of France. You know, we're growing our own roses, tubereuses, and we are planting now lavandine. So one day there will be certainly some lavender or lavandine being launched. We have many projects, but we try to stay focused and to restrict it.
Yes, really good. Because that's something that I noticed as well with the whole scent development thing, is that you cannot plan it to marketing. You know, you can say like a strict timeline and stuff. You have to like give it time, and when it's ready, it's ready.
Yeah, so for sure. And you know, even in the past, sometime we've been like, okay, we're gonna launch in 6 months. I don't know. I would say like a nutmeg or aniseed or a rose, and at the end, if we're not ready, we don't launch it. Yes. So you know, it's okay to say, okay, maybe we will, but sometimes we just don't because
it's not ready yet.
Because it's not ready, or sometimes you know you can't control things that are good or not. You know.
Yes, exactly. I know. Yeah.
My vision of perfumery and modern perfumery is not to create something too French. We create things for people so that they understand and they can appreciate wherever they're from, whether they're from Asia, whether they're from America, you know, wherever you are, you can appreciate the simple beauty of an ingredient.
Thank you very much for this interview.
Thank you, Kyle.
I will put like everything in the description, also make an intro to your person, and yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we are finished, I believe.
Super.
Okay.